Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I am
Dressed for International Women's Day.
well, not quite, but I'm happy to attribute it to International Women's Day. No, I'm looking. I'm an unusual colour today. I can't say I'm looking very Melbourne today.
No, you're not. I've taken over that mantle though.
Yeah, no.
I've made black t-shirt Melbourne.
Yeah, okay, great. I think it's the first time ever in my life I'm wearing like yellow, something fully yellow.
But this is a Vietnamese engagement party, isn't it?
It is. The reason why I'm so dressed up, everybody, because yeah, I'm normally not so dressed up, but you beat me to the next level down. My brother's getting engaged, and there's with Vietnamese custom and tradition, there is an engagement event of some sort.
Transfer of cattle.
Yeah, gold, cattle,
Money.
stuff like that. Yep. So I did consider the idea of like live streaming from there. That would have been fun.
That would have been good.
Yeah, just cows walking in the background, just, and all the noise.
Little
and
red bows.
Yeah, exactly. No, thought about it briefly, but no. So that's the reason why I'm dressed up, and it'll be great. I'll be rushing down there after this.
Good. What an exciting week though with National Women's Day. We've had sort of a celebration here, and it's good, isn't it?
It is. So it's nice and it's encouraging and to see so much positive dialogue year on year. I feel that more is being done and more is being talked about. International Women's Day. Yeah,
and I don't feel it's as tokenistic as it used to be, which is the problem in some ways when it started. It's like EA's day, which were only women, and so you take your
enterprise agreement days,
executive assistant day.
Oh, okay, sorry.
You take the man would take them out to have lunch, and they're meant to be very thankful that after you work them for 12 hours, 6 days a week for 10 years.
That's what do they get? Do they get a rose as well?
Well, yeah, something sufficiently misogynist. Yeah, that's what it used to be. So it's great to see the change. And when we look at the structure of our workforce, where I think it's 65% of our staff are women.
Yep.
And in the 5 most senior roles, 3 are held by women. It's sort of exciting, isn't it?
It is. We do that quite naturally, but look, even still, organisations are now, certain organisations, certain sectors being much more conscious and deliberate in terms of ensuring that happens more naturally.
And I think, with gender balance, despite what we see in federal politics and other places, these are deliberate behaviours that people have to have, because unconscious bias sits deeply inside us.
Absolutely.
All right, well, let's kick off, because it is time to kick off. We've got a pretty exciting week. We're going to do a little bit of a Karen session. I want you to see if you can name it. I wanted to call it Karen's Corner, but she thought that was misogynist, so we're not going to do it. But let's do a couple of cases to start with, which I think are sort of really interesting cases. Again, not because they're changing the law, but because they focus on issues which go to the very heart of how we manage people. So the first one is AMWU Santos, which is a drug and alcohol policy case, which doesn't sound terribly exciting, but it's on a mine site. It's where people are, where Santos was trying to control the use of alcohol outside of working hours, and they had a wet area and a bar for people. And what they're saying is, look, you can't go back to your room and drink. The risk analysis showed a number of risks that come with that, and we all know what they are. People drinking alone is a high risk, people drinking late in the night and therefore going to work affected by alcohol. So good risk assessment. But what are the rules about drugs and alcohol as a policy? One, you must do a proper risk assessment. Where you're imposing on someone's out of work amenity, you must take into consideration carefully their entitlement to have a drink when they feel like having a drink, so long as it doesn't create a risk for work. And then you must consult under an award or an enterprise agreement. There's a deep consultative part. And what Santos did is they just said, look, yeah, this is a really big risk. I think they were responding to some concerns they had. And so they imposed a policy, but didn't provide in their wet area around the bar places where the men and women could sit and have a private drink or sit quietly by themselves. The wet area was just a bar. And so the Fair Work Commission said, look, totally get the policy, but you've really failed to address the amenity, and you've deeply failed to address the concerns and engage with the people when you're affecting the way they live. And it's a common issue, isn't it?
It is, and in this case, it's about a drug and alcohol policy, which is the company good intentions. Obviously, it's very sound in terms of what their concerns would be. But if we had applied this to, let's say, making the workplace, or that outside of working hours, that area no smoking, or if we wanted to change, let's say, the toilets to unisex toilets, like things that affect people's amenities, which really affect everybody. The consultation part of it is absolutely critical.
And look, an example, a non-award-based example, is for a large financial services business. We introduced forms of love contracts, which were contracts which said you had to disclose the nature of relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Why did we do it? Well, if Karen and I are the two lead people and we have a relationship and we fall out,
Mm-hmm.
what are the risks that exist around reporting? Even if we don't fall out, what if Karen reports to me that we're in a relationship?
Mm.
Clearly to other people around, there's a lack of equity and clarity in what's going on. So we drafted those, but that was a deeply consultative process because it dealt with two things. One, the risks of women being treated quite differently to men in those relationships. As we know, in most of these occasions historically, when the relationship broke, the woman left. It was protecting the clients of both people because we don't want to lose clients because we fall out. But it also made people much more deliberate about, is this a one-night fling or is it a relationship? It stopped some of the misconduct that sat around, and it's been very effective inside that organisation. But the consultation process took us about 2 or 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a great case because it reminds us as we change the way people live and the amenity they enjoy in life, whether inside or outside of work, actually listening to people is a critical part for it to succeed. But where you've got award-based employees, it's actually critical to succeed at all. And the Fair Work Commission will say, great idea, but no, go back and start again. Next case is Sherry and Toyota. A couple of years ago, many of you would have heard me talk about DP World and Canaan, which was a case where a guy said he had a workers' compensation injury with his back. The business had a whole lot of scuttlebutt on the floor and they said there's nothing really wrong with him. This is a fraudulent claim. And it went to the stage they hired an investigator to peer over his fence and found him working on his vehicle, so they terminated his employment. And what came out is the medical evidence was absolutely clear that he had a bad back. And yes, he was working in his car, which was his favourite occupation, and he was being very careful about it not to injure his back. But it's true that at times he may, but he did have an injury, scuttlebutt. And I guess what I'm coming down to is we need to be very careful. We're a values-driven business, that we work through the lens of values, not through our personal value systems, and most particularly not through some form of gossip, which is about being critical with someone because it infects everything. Mm. And in this case, in Sherry and Toyota, this was a guy who was moving towards retirement, or actually redundancy, I think, in this process. He'd used the credit card of the business. There was an allegation he'd misused it. And the narrative around this man had infected the investigative process, where rather than being objective with the evidence, they found he had misused it. And of course, they got the Fair Work Commission, and the Fair Work Commission said, actually, he's been incredibly careful. Mm. He's done nothing wrong, but the gossip had infected the entire process, damaged a person who'd been very loyal to a business for a long period of time, damaged the brand of the business in the way that they behaved. And we're just talking about actual bias here.
Yeah, there's the unconscious bias part of it too.
Yeah. And look, how often have you heard somebody say, and I can remember sitting in a job interview where I was one of the 2 people in it, and a woman was applying effectively for a principal role in a law firm and was told, but look, you're probably going to have kids. How are you going to maintain your marketing and your client base when you're going to work part-time? And the girl just looked up and said, well, who says I'm having children? Mm. And you suggesting I can't be a partner because if I want to be a partner, I can't have children. I can remember sitting there going, God, I don't want any part of this conversation. This is the craziest conversation I've been.
Yeah, it's really hard to backtrack once you start that.
Yeah, and I watched the guy try and get out of it, and all he was doing was thinking about the business case, and he didn't realise he had this unconscious bias. He just didn't click. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, look, you have a lens in a business. It is your values. And that means we need to keep reminding each other of unconscious biases that come up. We need to be open, put your hand up and go, you know, Andrew, when you say that, that comes from a place that's not right. Mm.
Tell me a bit more about what you just said there.
Yeah. But let's try and get people open, because all of us, because of our own family histories, have unconscious bias. But here's a case that went completely sideways because people gossiped. Yep. And that gossip infected the entire chain of the disciplinary investigative process, appalling stuff. And that's exactly what the Commission said. The Commission was scathing. Now, we're over to Karen's Corner. But Karen, I think there is a really big issue that's emerging at the moment, which is how we use human capital. Maybe hand over to you.
Thank you. Now that I'm in my corner. Yes, human capital. Look, my colleagues and I have been looking at what's been trending across, I guess, the HR discussion groups, particularly across the country. And one of the things that keep coming up is around rethinking human capital, what that all means and what that actually involves. So there's a lot of talk around upskilling people. How do we utilize our workforce so that we can make them more flexible, so that we can allow people to transition from one job to another with ease, and allow organisations to be achieve that flexibility that they need. The way I look at it is, we sat back and had a think, and goes, look, I think before we answer those questions and get too deep into the detail of what that involves and why we do it, go back. I think as an organisation, we need to step back, or organisations need to step back and ask the question, well, hang on, what is our business now? Given the current market, like the operating environment that we're in, what is our business? What is it that we do? And from there, how do we need to be structured? What are the jobs? What are the roles? How do they need to be redefined? Do we need them? And if we need them, how do we redefine them?
And there's this sort of John Cotter argument where he just said, look, I designed a change management system, and in the 21st century, change is continuous, escalating, more disruptive and more volatile and less predictable. And so nearly all organisational human capital is built around a sustainable and consistent business model. And I don't think that exists now.
Yeah, but that's right. But it also needs to speak very clearly to the strategy of the organisation and how it's resourced and how it works day to day. It needs to marry up. Yeah, it needs to be cohesive. But that's a really deliberate process. So I've put together a slide. I'm not sure that everyone. Well, here we go. It's loading up.
Putting it up. Look at that.
Yeah. So what I've just put together here, a little visual for you. So in terms of strategic priorities, organisations, like most organisations, I would dare say, sitting right up there would be safety. They would want to have a growth trajectory, be adaptable now to market drivers or conditions, and have the operational flexibility, okay, to be able to achieve all that. What that involves, therefore, is that some questions you need to firstly ask around how you structure that. That then follows on to resourcing. How will you resource that? Because now it's just not a matter of direct employment. We're talking about, well, contractor arrangements are on an increase.
And just think of our business. Look at the contractor use. When we use contractors in different parts of the world, we use local contractors. Yep. There are more people we utilise outside of our business to deliver our service.
And the ongoing growth of the gig economy as well. So there's all that. How does that all fit in? There's a question around talent. So how do you attract the best talent? What is talent to you? How do you retain the best talent? How do you manage?
And look, here's an example. I've got a mechanic. I need a mechanic. Well, yeah, you do need a mechanic, but do you need a mechanic who understands what the client opportunities are for maintaining their own capital? Because clients use your vehicle to maximise the use of the vehicle. So just getting a mechanic who doesn't get clients means, as you need to have flexible shift structure, they're going to say, oh no, I work 7 till 3. Well, that's actually not the talent you want.
That's right. That's right. So, and things like, well, skill diversification and capability and development is definitely part of that as well. Another thing is people management, because now our workforce will be more diverse and complex than ever before.
And that's an operational skill.
It's
a misunderstood as being an HR skill. It's actually building up the operational capability of people to be open to the idea that I treat, no matter how a person comes before me, gig, contractor, employee, casual, no, I treat them all the same way, through the same eyes every time I'm dealing with them, because if they don't cohere in my flexible working, I'm actually in real trouble.
Yep.
Yeah. Can I just say on this issue, the reason we're talking about it now is because now's an opportunity, isn't it?
Absolutely. This is the time that you need to be thinking this very deeply. The last part of it is around value proposition, which is about what is the employee value proposition. So it's more than just a job now.
Yep.
I know that it's a competitive market out there, but it's more than just the role itself. The organisation's identity, what it stands for, what its branding is, and also in terms of culture engagement feeds into that as well. So as a whole, I hope that that diagram there, or that image there, helps you with your thinking.
And Linda, I can't quite see that, and I'm blind as a. Did you read that? No. I'm going to come back to you, Linda, on that. Can I just say, one of the things that really startles me at the moment is how volatile the world is. We've seen law firms just disappear. Large law firms just happened, announced today with one of them. But we're seeing people who continually collect what they describe as talent together, and it fails because it doesn't address what is the service provision that people need, because it's culture that delivers that. I think what Karen's really saying is at the end of this COVID and the end of JobKeeper, at the end of all this time, there is this sudden hiatus where we can't get people back to work. There's this enormous energy around what's our culture. This is definitely the time to go, yeah, what is it? Yeah. And to redefine, to redesign what we're doing, because everybody's expecting change. Yeah. And that happens once in a decade, you know.
Absolutely. But I think with this framework as well, Andrew, that it's just now it's COVID, but next time it'll be something else. So in terms of organisational readiness around how do we optimise human capital, I think it will be helpful just to keep revisiting these elements.
And can I just say, we've gone over time, and you read that one quick. Gone a little bit over time. Okay. Can I just say this? How often does it happen that we develop a strategy that's 45 pages long and nobody understands? The idea of change, and if you look at Boone and Sloan on leadership change, one of the things they say is make it incredibly simple so you can constantly move towards the leadership model that you need to address change. It's got to be constantly moving, but it's got to be simple. If it's complex, nobody can follow. What did Linda want to know?
We are looking at redundancies for a few of our lower skilled personnel. Okay.
Yeah.
And can you use the talent and requirements as part of skill assessment?
Yes, you can, most definitely. So as you do the skills matrix, and chat separately to Karen on this, as long as the skills matrix is objective, and as long as it's built around current and future needs, it is exactly the way that you can do it. And so talk to us offline, we can help you more with that. Now let's go on to the next slide, which is around 7 steps.
I'm out of the corner.
We're on. You're out of the corner. That's good. That's always a dangerous place. Can we also have some suggestions about what we should call Karen's segment? The corner's not going well.
Yeah, no.
Okay. We're doing currently about 7 or 8 enterprise agreements, and again, opportunity time. You know, great opportunity to jump in. Last week we did preparation. What have I got to do to actually prepare? This week we're going to talk about, as I go into the negotiation, what do I need to do? And the first thing is, if you don't know what your competitors are doing, and that's not just their wages and conditions, but it's actually what is their product and margin. You've got to actually know both ends of a strategic business: cost of labour, margin, profit.
Yeah, cost of labour versus cost of business.
Yeah, cost of business. Yeah. And if you don't know that, you actually can't do an enterprise agreement. All you're doing is creating cost. Remember last week I said your enterprise agreement must be cost neutral by the business development techniques that you build into it. So don't forget, what we're trying to do is grow margin and profit. Grow your margin, your profitability in an organisation, and your enterprise agreement is one of the primary tools of doing that. So you must know your competitors. The second thing is you must have some golden rules. What are the things that I must have in my enterprise agreement? And you do that by looking over a 10-year life of your business, just what we were talking about before. Where are we going to be? Because you can only do incremental things on each iteration of an enterprise agreement. We can do a lot more now because we're in the middle of COVID. So we have an opportunity to do some really exciting stuff. But what you can't do is go in there and say everything's on the table, because there are some things that must go in that enterprise agreement, and you work out what are the tools, what are your bargaining chips you're willing to let go in that process. But remember, total cost in enterprise agreement. Everything comes back to total cost. You're after flexibility and low total cost. Okay, couple of things just to keep in mind. Do you know what your employees want? Now, we're going to talk a little bit afterwards about doing bargaining, which is not based on oppositional bargaining techniques, where there's a winner and a loser. You actually can't do that unless 18 months out, you've started an engagement process with your employees to learn actually what does matter to them, and to actually start to socialise the change you need so it becomes theirs. When you turn up to your first bargain, what you want is the union saying, yeah, 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 and your stakeholders, the employees who are sitting with them and behind them, going, no, that's actually not quite right. Okay? You need the people with you, not against you, because you don't recover from your staff being against you. And if you have a look at an ERM of productivity, in an oppositional bargain, you find that your productivity and quality stays down significantly from where you need it. Not for just the life of the bargain, for months and months and months afterwards. So oppositional bargaining is incredibly expensive. Feels good because it's full of testosterone. It's usually boys who are doing it. They're usually thumping the table. We come out and we win. We got 2.5. Yay! But we've actually lost productivity, which is massive. So next thing is good faith bargaining, which is being open, being sincere, being respectful, being willing to show and explain and answer questions, is something you should define on the very first meeting. It is the first thing that is agreed. Okay? If you don't do that, you're going to allow bad behaviour to creep into it. That says terrible things to our stakeholders. Again, who are our primary stakeholder? Our employees. Would we allow any employee to behave badly except in a bargain? No, we wouldn't. So in a bargain, we will behave well and we'll have an expectation of good behaviour, and we'll show we're honest, have integrity and sincerity in everything we do, and we will speak to the needs of our employees, not just ourselves. Okay. Once you've done all that, work out what you want to do, draft your perfect enterprise agreement, and then with your negotiating group, game it out. Sit down and have 2 or 3 days of practice. Why? Whenever you come to me, you say, can you put down the FAQs, the frequently asked questions, so that we make sure we can answer things? You must game it out. You must try and see what is the union's point of view, because there are 2 different people. There's a third party in the room and there's your employees. So you've got to play out what the union. Now, how do I find that? I just go and have a look at their online log. It's the same everywhere they go. Absolutely. So there's no magic in what they're doing. And you look at the history of your own bargain and see what they tried to push last time. They're not putting a lot of time into it. Absolutely. They're just bashing away for money. Okay. So game it out so that you do, and then you find out who is good and who is not good. Because there are some people who are just not good negotiators and they should not be leading the bargain. So say amongst yourselves, and commonly vote, rate each other out of 10 how we went at it. So you can say, oh, Karen, I don't know if you should be the person doing it. Have honest discussions, because it's too late when you're involved. We talked about communication structure, but remember, you should be out to your employees before anyone else. You should have perfect control over everything that you do. You should manage each iteration and draft, and should be identified, all correspondence, notes of everything, because if you end up in the commission arguing over what a clause means, it is those contemporaneous documents which demonstrate what the intention of the clause was. And the union won't keep that. They'll just come back and say that was never our intent. So please, comms and document control.
And
really good.
The structure, people like structure. So that means that every time that there is a meeting, that the company or you head out and you speak and you update your employees, that happens every time. And you need to keep up with that. Because if you don't, it's a lost opportunity. Totally
lost opportunity. And it means that some of those documents will find their way home. But the great thing about that is this is a chance to engage your supervisors in management in leading that communication and growing them as leaders. And it doesn't matter if they're in the union, okay? It's just a great opportunity to draw them close so they can see the sincerity of what you're doing. And again, that alignment between we need flexibility, you've enjoyed flexibility, this is how we're going to do it, okay? And of course, the last part, as I've said, is make sure that you build relationships in the enterprise agreement, not destroy them, okay? Be the honest one, be the one with integrity. Don't be drawn into the void of fighting and being rude and sniping. It's just really poor. And the other part is always be yourself. So don't come in, we've talked about this in the performance management, where I come in with a slightly deeper, slower voice, and Karen goes, you're about to sack me. Just be you. If you've got a funny side, be you. Because you actually don't know that other person. And so when someone does something bad, you're a two-dimensional character. You can't respond to it. When you're being yourself and someone's rude to you, you can say, hey, wait a second. Please don't speak to me like that. Because you can actually find the language because you're being you. So don't try and be someone you're not, because you will always be found out. Now, they're my 7 steps to good negotiation.
Very practical.
Can we get up the little, this one? We're sending this out to you, which is it's just a bit of a warning sign. When you're negotiating, can you have a look at it? What I want is integrated bargaining, okay? I want you to have a win-win for everybody, and I don't want you to be fighting each other. But it requires so much more work behind the negotiation, which means you always get a better outcome. You can always do positional bargaining. That means I walk into a room and I say, no, I have to win. But these are our people. We don't win against our employees. We win with our employees. So that's just something for you to have a look at a different time, but you'll understand why I want interest-based bargaining as a method of doing it. And we've got people who specialize in training you in Karen's team who can actually assist you with that. All right, we're off and running. We're into the next part. There we are, case study. Jenny is a welder in a caravan assembly plant responsible with 3 others for welding suspension assemblies to chassis. The company has introduced some automation which reduces the level of manual welding. It does not change the manual welding in her pit, but does in the tow bar pits. So there's a chassis, and at the end of the caravan, there's a tow bar. Jenny has been a poor attendant at work, frequently late, absent after weekends and following public holidays. She's rude, and both the supervisor and manager are sick of her. Now, we've all got that. What's fantastic model for bargaining? Oh, thank you. Jenny has a high level of skills compared to 12 others out of the group. There has been there for 9 years. Average tenure is 4 years, but has several counselling warnings over the last months. God, I wish I could read this. I'm sitting further away than any. Automation requires 2 new QA roles. Jenny has not been considered for those roles, although she's certainly skilled for them. The consultation around the redundancy process took 2 days, including a group presentation showing loss of job numbers, individual sessions with each person, listening to alternatives, and then the decision was made that Jenny was not offered or considered the QA jobs, and she was made redundant. Okay, none of this is news to any of us, is it? Very common process when we wash out during a redundancy process. So let's ask the questions. Sophie, the poll. We're not going to be able to read that poll, you understand, but I have to go to my poll notes. Here we are.
The footage of us will be funny.
No, we're gonna need binoculars.
So we're gonna screenshot that later on and just like.
I am so blind. I can barely see the screen. We're gonna need to be like bands and have a little feedback box that we can actually see.
I think I've got binoculars at home. We can do that.
Little opera glasses.
Exactly. Oh, that would be cool. Actually, that would be funny.
All right, let's go for another 30 seconds.
Oh, not quite. We're nearly in a minute already, so I think another 5 seconds.
You
need a bigger screen.
We do. I know. I agree with you.
All right. I think we're going to stop it.
Okay, let's stop it here.
Yeah.
All right. Can you just move that so I can see your head? Because at the moment you're just a series of questions.
No. I think you need to actually see the results.
Do I?
Yes.
Okay. There we are. So under the award, was the consultation lawful? The answer is absolutely no. So it looked nice. So it had the shimmer of being sort of right. But the problem is, under Deakin University case, there's a couple of things that are very clear that have come out. And this has now been approved at a number of different levels. One, when I do the group presentation, I must actually allocate and mark the roles which would be made redundant. And I must explain the system by which I'm going to get there. Okay. When I do the individual ones, I must put to the person, how do I mitigate or reduce the impact from them? One of them is definitely to say what are the alternative roles that could be available, and to inquire of them whether they can think of anything else, or whether they may be suitable for those. So we fell a little bit at the first hurdle, but we definitely fell at the second hurdle. Okay. There is Nina and Matt who work with us have both set up a specialist process to go through consultation. So if you ever want that template of what does good consultation look like, send me a message and I'll get Matt or Nina to contact you and give you just our tick list, things I must do when consulting around it, okay? And it's the same for all awards. Some of them are a bit more difficult than others, but so the first answer is no. Was redundancy a valid reason for termination? Now, this is a trick question, which I can see by the numbers we've got. No one got the trick, only I got it. If consultation is imperfect, it's not a valid reason. Okay, and that means the exception on the unfair dismissal rule falls away and it can become an unfair dismissal. So it's not a valid reason. Remember, there's 4 tests. Is it a valid reason? Yes, that's the doorway in, okay, to defending an unfair dismissal. Then is it harsh, unjust, or unreasonable? Sorry, didn't get through the doorway. So you would have failed the unfair dismissal, okay? They would have got up. Next question, though, just say they did get up. Was it harsh, unjust, or unreasonable? So harsh is termination not fair given the person's longevity of service? Not really a big redundancy question, okay? Was it unjust? Was it not accurate? And the answer is absolutely not accurate because the person had the skills to go for a particular job, okay? So it's unjust. And in the same circumstances, given that person's tenure, was the manner in which he was treated unreasonable? And that goes particularly to fairness, to the fairness of the process. So the answer to your question, the last question is, she would have won this case and she would have got reinstated. Okay, and that would be absolutely the worst result, because A, there was no need to make anyone redundant in her pit, and she was more skillful than anyone else. So on a skills matrix, she would have got up. We would have really struggled. The behavioural part would have had a weight to it, but not too high a weight. She would have got up, and she certainly would have been eligible for the QA role. But the worst part is her pit was unaffected. Okay, really dangerous process. So remember, washing out people during redundancy is an extraordinarily dangerous process. This is a performance issue that should have been managed years ago. And I know we do this, and it's my dirty trick. Every time we have a problem, I keep going, yeah, the redundancy sounded nice, but this was 3 or 4 years ago they should have been addressing this. This would be out. And she wouldn't have cost a redundancy.
Yeah, that's my experience too.
Yeah.
There's always more often than not, it's a performance issue that wasn't managed.
So look, I'm sorry, today was a trick question, but the reason is one of the things Linda raised is we're going through the process of managing human capital at the moment about who do we need and who do we not need. And in every conversation I've had for the last 2 weeks around redundancies, people have tried to push a few names into them and gone, this would be a good chance to get rid of Fred. And I want you to think about that. Yeah, look, that's my skill. Okay, my skill is building an evidence base which allows you occasionally to wash some people through. But what do I say to you every time as we go through this? Let's get the consultation process perfect. Okay? Let's build an evidential matrix that could survive criticism, that could take that person with you. But with this time, we would have really struggled with Jenny. And the answer is always, let's build our leadership capability around managing performance so that we don't get stuck. And I love seeing what the marks are here, because this is a very difficult legal problem, okay? This is the type of problem that I used to put in university exams when I lectured, because only a lawyer knows the particular risk that sits in the middle of it, okay? And the particular risk, of course, is what is a valid reason? And a valid reason means any procedural failing makes it not a valid reason. So Karen, that's me, and I have another slide here, which is this case study poll, which shows I haven't read my paper first beforehand. So for me, guys, that is it. And next week we move on to the third emerging problem that we need to solve for 2021. And don't ask me what it is, because tomorrow I have to make that up.
Okay. I'm sure it'll be good.
Enjoy the engagement party.
Yeah, I will. All right.
See you later, guys.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks,
See you next week.
Bye-bye.